Welcome back, everybody, to Film Music Focus. Today we're going to take a look at three cues from the 1994 film Forrest Gump, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and the music composed by, of course, the great Alan Silvestri. I love this music so much. I love the film so much. It's an incredible story of an otherwise simple man who achieves extraordinary things in his life, and I love the music in so many ways. This music is both complex, it's simple, and this constant bifurcation of these two themes going against one another philosophically throughout the film are captured so perfectly through the music. And we get it right away at the very outset of the film. We're given this beautiful tone and texture and kind of shows us both audibly and visually with that great downwards camera movement as the feather is falling and falling and falling, eventually landing on Forrest Gump on the bench. What's to come? And all this beauty that we're about to experience, we get right away in the music. So it's a wonderful way to set things up. So we're in G major to start. Well, I guess we don't know we're in G major not at the beginning. We open with these fifths, so we don't really know if we're in major or in minor. But anyway, so here we are. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on. Syncopated. We got 4 bars of this. We're in 4/4 time. Here's the tune. So pretty. C major to A minor, D major, back to G, down to E minor, C major, down again, back to G. Here's the tune down an octave. I like this section here very much. Opens up, lots of arpeggiations, very nice for the piano. Anyway, so you get the idea. What a beautiful theme this is. So let's kind of take a look at some of the things going on. There's a lot of things, at least for me, I think, that go into making this so magical. One of the things is rhythm. So let's take a look and listen. This right away, we're on beat 1, but it's syncopated. So the syncopation is one of the things that I like so much about this melody and the accompaniment material on the left hand, this tune. Now, if we want to perhaps reimagine it very quickly without the syncopation, I'm not so sure it would work as well. Not quite. It's not the same feeling. So this always interrupting where we're supposed to be rooted. Are we rooted on the downbeat? Are we rooted on the upbeat? Well, he roots us very much in the syncopated side of things to begin with, and I love that part of it. Let's keep to the rhythm for a couple more minutes. So generally speaking, we get 1, beat 1, beat 1, and then again we'll get beat 1, 3, 4, 1, 1, 3, 4, 1. So we get a lot of ones and the occasional 3, 4, 1 as we move downwards in trajectory. So one of my favorite parts of all of this melody is right here in this section. And the reason I like that so much is that because instead of just 1, 3, 4, 1 or 1, 3, 4, 1, we get 1, 3, 1, 3, and here it is. Again, here it is. 1, 3, 1, 3. And it's the only time in this whole opening melody that we get 1, 3, 1, 3. And because of that, I think it creates a very, very special part of the music here. Let's talk about the harmony here. I have adored Alan Silvestri's music for as long as I've been listening to film music. And Back to the Future was one of the first things I ever heard that he had composed, very quickly followed by Romancing the Stone, which is before Back to the Future, but for me it was the film that I had heard thereafter. But let's talk a little bit about cadences. Now that is what you would call a perfect cadence from G, the 1 chord, to the 5 chord, or if you want to call it the 5/7, back to your root 1. It's a perfect cadence versus a plagal cadence. If we're here in G, a plagal cadence would be coming from the subdominant, in this case the 4 chord, the C chord, back to G, the 1 chord. Or we could go from the 2 chord, the A minor, back down to G. So either way, either the 2 chord to 1 or the 4 chord to 1, that would be a plagal cadence. So the perfect cadence is used a lot here in Forrest Gump, and Alan's harmony throughout his career has just been so beautiful in this way, and you might recognize these kinds of sounds from some of his other films as part of his musical DNA. Let's just kind of keep going, improvise a little bit. Who recognizes this? That's from Avengers Endgame. So there's some really beautiful harmonies here, and I just love the simplicity that you get just from that. So these types of harmonies are all over Forrest Gump. So while it sounds simple, it's not so simple when you marry the music to the film. And a lot of times, the simplest, most traditional of harmonies, the way that they're used when you orchestrate them and when you marry them to film, they bring on a life of its own. And while this is certainly a sound that many of us know, because that perfect cadence is the most common cadence in tonal music. Now, how you treat it is what makes these things so special, and the way that Alan orchestrates this music and the way it is presented against picture makes it so very unique. So I adore this opening cue. Let's have a listen to the main title or feather theme from Forrest Gump. And I only played kind of the first section, and what you'll hear later after the material that comes after where I stopped, you'll hear the flute takes over the melody, and then all of a sudden we go from G and we end up in B flat, and we'll talk about that relationship between G major and B flat major later in the next cue we'll take a look at, which just happens to also start in G. So we'll see you in a bit. Enjoy the feather theme from Forrest Gump, composed by Alan Silvestri. Okay, so as you all heard there, just it's so beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes every time I see this film. The beginning, the middle, the end. I mean, the whole film. It really tugs at your heartstrings. And so here's a little bit of a departure from this very beautiful emotional material. Here, all of a sudden, we're entering the world of athletic adrenaline. This cue is called Crimson Gump, and it's not the first time that you hear, I guess, what we could call the running theme. But it is the first time that we hear it with just a full-fledged, massive orchestra playing the percussion battery, to kind of echo the traditions of football music that we hear both at the college level and perhaps at the NFL level through things like NFL Films, which, the music from NFL Films in the 80s was incredibly cool, wasn't it? The way they recorded the brass, they stuck those microphones as far up the French horn bells as they could, and it almost sounded like they were playing on a metallic ocarina. So let's take a look and a listen to what's happening here in Crimson Gump, also starting in G. Okay, so right away, let's talk about what's happening here. I love this. I love the idea harmonically of being able to come up with whatever your material is in your root key. Whatever you're doing here, do it again, but with the fourth in the bass. In this case, going down the fifth to C, but C being the fourth note of the G major scale. And it just gives a sense of strength. Where is it going to go? It could go down to B flat, could come back up to G. Now, if we were to gone just to the 5 chord, we'd instantly want to, and know we were going to be going back to G. We're likely going back to G. So, here's the horns. Now this is quite high for a horn. There's a D up here, but it's so powerful when it's orchestrated. Back down the scale, and then again. So this material here, you get it twice, and then all of a sudden these beautiful fanfares and the trumpets up here. I love this. So a bit of a departure about the trumpet section. It's kind of a fun little story. Gary Grant, who's a great trumpet player, he's played on so many film scores over the years. He's an incredible musician. He was on this film score. He's played many scores for Alan Silvestri over the years, and he was the reason why I had an opportunity to meet Alan Silvestri for the first time on the scoring stage to Contact. And so I love thinking about whatever trumpet sounds there are, just because Gary really was humble enough and kind enough to give me that first opportunity to meet Alan Silvestri when I was a young kid. So anyway, here we are up in this fun little fanfare in the trumpet. We're in C now. Back to the home key. Now here we go to the flat 7. I love this material. Now where do we go? Do we go back to G? Where do we go from the flat 7, which is F major? Well, we go to B flat. We go to E flat. So we have a fun little cycle of fourths progression from F to B flat to E flat. We'll do that again. Here's C major. Back to the original home key of G. Flat 7 and F. Then we're in E flat. F. Now here's the trombones. They have some fun here. Or rather, they go. And where does he go next? He goes to D major. Same thing in the trombones. Now where do we go from D major? It's kind of a departure from what was happening. So let's go back to where F to D. Call it a substitution chord, because F would normally go back if we treated it as a 5 chord. It would go right to B flat, right? But he doesn't do that. He goes and he gives it a substitution chord, D major, and then we end up in B flat. The same material, at very powerful 1 to 4, which I love so much. And the second time that we get it, this thematic material, we're in a very, very strong key of B flat, which is a great key for trumpets, particularly if they're playing on B flat trumpets and not C trumpets. It's super powerful. I love it. And you get a lot of percussion here. If you listen to the percussion, the snare drums are doing drags on every brum, 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 brum. For those of you that don't know what a drag is, it's basically a quarter note, or any note rather. And if you put just kind of a dig-a-dun, dig-a-dun, dig-a-dun right before it, almost like a grace note, but 2 of them, it's what we call a drag. You could put 3 of them in there. There's various different ways of playing it, but I love this sound. Brum, 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 when you have all the, and we have the same material here. The strings take it back to B flat, and then we go to E flat here. And where do we go from E flat here? What does he do? Well, he goes to D major. So what's interesting about this, at least for me from a theoretical standpoint, is here we were, if you recall earlier, that's an F. That D major went to, took us to B flat. Now here all of a sudden we're in B flat. So we go from B flat to D major as opposed to, that's what I get for hitting my hands too hard. Being animated, hit the keys, whereas before we went from D major to B flat. So, and this is just how it ends. And the cue's out. So let's have a listen to the fully orchestrated Crimson Gump. I mean, it really, wham, out of the gate, hits you. And it's so perfect against the film. Again, this simplicity of Forrest Gump. He's so fast, and all he knows how to do in this scene is just run. Run, 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 and he does, and he scores that touchdown on the kickoff return. So, Crimson Gump, composed by Alan Silvestri. We will see you in a moment. So that's a fun one. Adrenaline thrilled, athletic driven. It's a lot of fun, that cue. So let's take a listen to the last one here. We'll take a look at what's going on. This one's, I believe, on the album called Jenny's Grave. It's one of the last tracks on the soundtrack album. And it's a short cue, but I want to talk about how the type of harmony that might look or sound simple is not so simple when you orchestrate it properly and it's voiced right. And it's you'll hear these harmonies are very much a part of Alan Silvestri's DNA. And let's take a listen and a look at what's happening here. So we're back in G. It's a key that you hear a lot in this film. But here's your G and D split in the first violins. And they're muted. They're just kind of sustaining here. The second violins kind of come in below it. And if any of you recognize that tune, in the second violins, you get that elsewhere in the film. I'm not sure if it's called Jenny's theme, but you get it a lot when you see and hear the relationship both through dialogue and visually on screen between Jenny and Forrest Gump. So here again, this is how it starts. Second violins. All the while, the first are still sustaining this fifth. Seconds again. Now all of a sudden you have this introduction here in the lower strings, violins, G and C. You have the fourth in the scale, and the clarinet solo comes in here. And all the while, the violins are now not holding the fifth, but they're holding the fourth between D and G, and that beautiful clarinet solo again, it's along these lines. And I love that. Now all of a sudden the harp takes over, along with the piano. This is the harp playing C, D, G, and the piano kind of fluctuates here to start. There it is again. There's Jenny's tune. So what we have here is this kind of oscillation between harp and piano. And here's my favorite part in the cue. Listen down low. Oh, the money note for me is the E, which is voiced in the violas. Now you still have this going on up here in the harp. Now let's take a listen to what the harmony is here. Now, there's a couple things we could call this. We could call it just kind of playing around with a G major 13 chord. So here's your G major 13 chord, voiced out from root position upwards. G, B, D, F sharp, A, C, the 11th, and here's your 13th, the E natural. That's not technically how it's voiced, but because you get that C in the harp. So there's a couple ways to look at it. You could call this a G major 13 chord over C, or you could just look at this as C Lydian, which all of those notes in the G major 13 chord make up the scale in a C Lydian sound. So that you could look at it either way. I'd prefer to call it a G major 13 over C, which is a little bit more precise if you were to write a G major 13 over C versus just kind of C Lydian for someone who is improvising. You get a very, very different approach. But again, so you have all these sounds just kind of mixed. And then when the low strings come in. Okay, now let's talk about orchestration here for a second. For those of you that already know this, apologies for the basic lesson. But for those that don't, in general, if you play piano, you don't play piano, you're trying to get better at piano, and you're an orchestrator, you're an arranger, you're a composer, it's a pretty safe bet that if it sounds pretty good on the piano, it's going to sound pretty good in the orchestra if it's orchestrated well. Let's take this example. C, G, E. It's a great voicing. Your root, followed by a fifth, followed by a major sixth up. Now you can hear just in the piano how nice that is. That's the same voicing in F, back down to C. Now if I were to take this E, drop it down the octave, already in the piano, the closed voicing sounds nasty and muddy. You open this up, and it sounds great on the piano in the same way that it would sound in the orchestra. So this is how it's voiced. It's simple. You have basses, cello, viola in this cue, and it's just gorgeous. And now still up here, he's still playing with his G major 13 sound. And as this sound fades away, the harp still tinkers here. And the piano, beautifully played by, I think, Randy Kerber in this one of my favorite piano players in all of LA. His touch is so soft and amazing. So I love how this cue fades out with these low strings, and the harp still gives us the same material that you had at the very beginning of section 2 in this cue, after we heard that clarinet solo. So anyhow, the harmony here is rather simple, but the way it's used, and this is such an important lesson, I think, in composition. You can take the most basic of things. I mean, Beethoven's a great example of sitting on the 5 chord for 2.5 minutes in a row. It's not brilliant that he's sitting on the 5 chord for 2.5 minutes. What's brilliant and genius is how he does it, and how he makes your ear always feel like it's going to pop. It's going to go somewhere. Eventually, it's going to resolve. And when it resolves, my gosh, what he did to get you there was brilliant. And these are the kinds of things you can take very simple devices, traditional devices, old devices that have been around since 15th century, 16th century, and turn them into new, fresh things. And this idea of the plagal cadence versus the perfect cadence, it's just great. So I hope that if you haven't seen Forrest Gump, you go see it right away. It's so beautiful. You'll love it with your families, with your kids, as you're indoors. Just go watch it on your own. So with that concludes this episode of Film Music Focus, with one very exciting announcement. For the next Film Music Focus episode, we will have the composer of Forrest Gump joining us to talk about his career and his music, composer Alan Silvestri. We're very humbled and excited to have him here. He's an incredible guy, an incredible composer. So you're all in for a real treat. Hope you all tune in to hear this wonderful chat with Alan Silvestri. We'll see you soon for the next Film Music Focus.
Brought to you by Cine Concerts.